Good afternoon. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. The Appropriations Subcommittee on State and Local Transportation will come to order, and will the clerk please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Steele?
Here.
Representative Slaw?
Present.
Representative Borton?
Here.
Representative DeSena?
Here.
Representative Robinson?
Here.
Representative Morgan?
Here.
Representative Edwards?
Here.
All 7 members are in attendance. You have a quorum.
Awesome. So Representative Slaw moves to adopt the minutes of the August 13th meeting. Being no objections, the motion prevails by unanimous consent. Okay, we are ready to go. So hello, committee members. Thank you for being here today. Today's committee was called to discuss road weights. Very interesting topic. MDOT and the Michigan State Police Commercial Vehicle Enforcement Division manage road weights in our state. With us today is a member of the Michigan State Police Commercial Vehicle Enforcement Division, Inspector Morris, and his team. So, Inspector Morris, if you could come to the podium and share what you have regarding road weights with us, and introduce your team as well, because I know you have a couple people. And if you want to all come on up, there's room now. Okay. So, whenever you're ready, go.
Thank you. Well, good morning to everybody. Inspector Patrick Morris, Michigan State Police Commercial Vehicle Enforcement Division. With me today is Lieutenant David Haynes, also with the Commercial Vehicle Enforcement Division. I oversee statewide operations as it pertains to personnel. Lieutenant Haynes is over our recruiting and training section. I had Lieutenant Haynes accompany today because he is the one that trains not only our new officers, but local officers, as well as our in-service training for fundamental training as they develop throughout their career. So, first I'd like to start by maybe giving you a little history and background on our size and weight program. We provided you with a copy of our size and weight report. That is our FY 2025 report. And that report really has some good information, background on our program. The first couple of pages talks about our infrastructure. What do we have? Number of weigh stations, number of weigh-in motions, wireless weigh-in motions for screening traffic. Of course, the number of personnel dedicated to size and weight enforcement. It talks about other legalities, any legal changes that might impact our size and weight program. And then it talks about our long-term goals, our short, medium, and long-term goals, if applicable. That plan is submitted annually, fiscally, should I say, to the Federal Highway. The Federal Highway certifies that plan. That plan is what allows MDOT to receive X amount of funds from the Federal Highway. How much, I have no idea on that. But what I do know is, indirectly from MDOT to MSP through our MOU, we receive approximately $12.8 million for size and weight enforcement and support of those activities. And when I say size and weight enforcement, it does also include general enforcement of commercial vehicles. So not everything is specific to size and weight, but the majority is size and weight. And that also goes to maintain our weigh station facilities, which there are 15 scattered throughout the state. You should have a copy, appendixes, that show the number of weigh stations and where they're located. So if you're not familiar with those, hopefully that'll be a useful aid. Our MDOT funds, again, annually, we receive those. The primary focus with those is going to be size and weight enforcement, road patrol, weigh station operations, overtime operations, as well as any improvements or enhancements to our facilities. Does anybody have any questions so far? Anything? Okay. A little history on our facilities. Over the past 5 years, we have had some carry forward funds, specifically under MDOT funds, our state restricted funds for size and weight. That's due to several reasons. Number one, an increase in overall budget that we've had. Number two, a decrease in the number of personnel. So vacancy savings has allowed us to have some carry forward funds. Those carry forward funds is what is actually propelled us forward in getting the weigh stations either new or updated. So to date, all of our weigh stations are completely renovated with the exception of 2 in the southwest corner of the state, and that would be our new Buffalo weigh stations on I-94 coming in and leaving at the Indiana port of entry. All of our weigh stations are up to date with not only interior but exterior. That includes pavement, that includes our weigh deck itself. Prior to that, and prior to these funds being available, which started in about 2020, we really had not done any significant updates to our facilities for about 40 years. If you're not familiar, MDOT owns the facilities. We man the facilities, but we are responsible for the maintenance of the buildings, general maintenance. With this carry forward funds in our MOU, we asked for a specific line item to be added, and that is for elapsed funds to be used specifically, if there are elapsed funds in the trunk line, for weigh station improvement or other items directly related to size and weight enforcement to protect our infrastructure here in the state. So I wanted to give you a little background on that as well, just so you're familiar with the updates that have occurred from 2020 until now. What's next for us is we have 3 additional renovations, and we are proposing a new weigh station on northbound I-75 near Birch Run. Some of you may remember we used to have 2 weigh stations on I-75 in Saginaw County. Those were destroyed in 2005, mainly because of budgetary reasons. They couldn't be maintained. Fast forward, if you look at the map where our weigh stations are located, we have 1 inbound weigh station, northbound I-75, that's in Monroe. We have a southbound weigh station in Pontiac. So essentially between Monroe County and the Mackinac Bridge, where we have another weigh facility, there are no weigh stations northbound on I-75. So we are starting to focus on that for 2 reasons. A, MDOT still retains the property, and B, the infrastructure, for the most part, is still in place, so it's a reasonable build. So strategically, what we've done is update our weigh stations and partnered with MDOT to utilize their wireless weigh-in motions. So around the state, there are multiple sensors. MDOT uses them primarily for traffic counts. However, we discovered back in 2005 that those could also be used for weight, to capture weight and length. We utilize 43 of those sites now statewide, web-based, from our patrol unit to screen commercial vehicles. So essentially what we have is a stationary weigh station. We coupled that with multiple safe enforcement sites. Safe enforcement sites have been added to the majority of our primary rest areas. In those rest areas, we have what's called a cutout. This cutout is what we slip our portable scales in that we carry in our patrol cars. This allows us to screen with the wireless weigh in motion, stop a vehicle, take it to a safe haven, and weigh it in a fraction of the time that it normally would have taken us. Normally, we'd have to weigh each axle, put boards under the following axles to make sure everything's on an even plane. With this, we simply put it into the ground in the cutout that's provided, and we have the driver go directly over it. So you can see all the things that MDOT and Commercial Vehicle Enforcement Division has done in our partnership to enhance weight enforcement within this state. We never had the totality of what we have now. The wireless weigh-in motions, the safe enforcement sites, updated weigh stations, and then, of course, our patrol cars that have the capability to communicate with those wireless weigh-in motion sites. So we really transformed our weight enforcement over the last 2 decades. So, any questions from the committee at all?
Rep. Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. I guess Yeah, I was curious, you had mentioned concerns about financially supporting doing the work initially, but if we are having MDOT pay for that enforcement, wouldn't that be the funding mechanism for it? It sounds like maybe you've instead found a more cost-effective way to do the enforcement, but I'm curious to that piece. It seems like the funding for the enforcement of the weights is coming from MDOT for that.
That is correct. Can you hear me? There we go. That, we receive approximately $12.8 million, MSP does. About 11.8 of that is actually dedicated to CVED for size and weight enforcement. We utilize those funds for all those activities that are size, weight, and general enforcement of our trunk lines. We do have other funds. Our overall CVED budget for Commercial Vehicle Enforcement Division is $37 million, roughly. We have three major funding sources. MDOT, which is through state restricted, through our MOU, which is $12.8 million. We receive about $14.8 million from our Motor Carrier Safety Alliance Plan, MIXAP, our federal funds from FMCSA. And then we have other funding sources that make up the rest of our budget. We have those primarily in silos. So our officer daily system that we capture all of our information is based on a number of codes or inputs that the officer will put in. There are certain inputs that funnel those funds into those silos so the appropriate activity matches the funding source. Primarily, all of our size and weight enforcement will only come from MDOT. Does that answer your question?
Not entirely. I guess I'm curious. It seems, I guess I hear concerns from folks regularly saying, asking how we're weighing trucks and things to make sure that they're within the limits that we have on them. You had mentioned the funding concern, but it doesn't sound like we have a lot of weigh stations around the state. It does seem like you're setting up, and I'm just trying to understand because it's somewhat complicated the way you've described all happening. So do we not need the weigh stations anymore if you're able to do these sort of mobile weigh stations? I guess I'm just trying to understand all of that.
We utilize both, and here's why. There's no question that we can screen more vehicles through our weigh stations. But it doesn't account for bypass routes or other trunk lines in which drivers can go around the weigh stations. There are a lot of trucks that never pass over a fixed scale, a weigh station. There are those that will circumvent them. We have both inter and intrastate traffic with totally different patterns. So mobile patrol has somewhat of a different mission than that of our weigh station operations. Although a focus on weight enforcement, where we seek that and where we find those violations are completely different. There is no question that the number of vehicles we can screen through a weigh station for weight is much higher than that we can in a mobile capacity. We screen about 5 to 6 million vehicles per year through our weigh stations. We weigh physically between our weigh stations and our mobile patrols. We conduct about 11,000 actual weighs. Of those 11,000 actual weighs, vehicles or combinations or that are cited is roughly about 6,000. So we screen over 5 million, we weigh approximately 11,000, and that weight of those 11,000 is a combination of weigh station, mobile patrol, with our portable scales. And then, of course, like I said, we issue approximately 6,000 overweight citations per year. It fluctuates, plus or minus 500 given the year, but in general, that is what we produce in the area of size and weight.
Thank you. Did you want to add an explanation to something?
I could, if you'd like Madam Chair. So one quick thing, maybe to make the connection between your testimony and our budget. So in the transportation budget, if you look at interdepartmental grants, there's a 12.9 million interdepartmental grant from the state trunkline fund that helps support this program in the Michigan State Police budget. So if you look in our budget, an interdepartmental grant is like outgoing funds to that department, and then they will see that in the Michigan State Police budget as a revenue source supporting that activity. And again, it supports the operations of commercial vehicle enforcement, but at the end of the year, they don't spend the entire appropriation. I mean, they always have to fall below the appropriation. And they sometimes, in the past, have taken those lapsed funds and put them into a work project to help the capital program of refurbishing these way stations. So that's the connection. I think that's what you're referring to.
Yes, sir.
So that's, I don't mean to,
That is correct.
I'm only trying to make that connection between our budget and the testimony.
Perfect, and that is correct. Thank you for that. Yes, that budget, again, directly supports our size and weight program. The elapsed funds or carry forward, if we have any, are put toward future work projects. All those enhancements we talked about earlier were the direct result of those carry forward funds. Again, why we have carry forward funds? Mainly due to the fact that we have attrition savings. Our number of personnel currently for officer strength is 97. We usually operate on average over the last decade at about 108 officers. Our peak officers were in 2020 at 119. Why the drop in the number of officers? It can do obviously size and weight enforcement. There's a primary reason for that. Defined benefit retirements, for those that have them, it's usually 30 years of service at 55 years of age, and most of those individuals leave. That has occurred in a large number over the past 4 to 5 years. What's happening now is that's starting to slow now that the defined benefit retirees, for the most part, are gone. That leaves defined contribution. Defined contribution are those that only have the 401k. So what we're seeing is we're starting to see a little bit of a leveling field. And as we recruit, and we plan to run a recruit school in January, and subsequently another one in June of next year, we hope to have the number of officer strength back up to our average of about 108. If it's a slight tick higher, that would be more than welcome. So why we've experienced some of these carry forward funds over the past 5 years, we anticipate those carry forward funds coming to a closure because the bulk of that will be then spent on wage and benefits to increase our officer strength. Does that make sense to everybody? So we were fortunate in one aspect that we had attrition and we had low numbers as far as strength because it allowed us to add to our way station facilities, enhance them with technologies, infrastructure, as well as our mobile patrols. But now that we have that in place, it's time for us to build back up the number of enforcement members doing the job, and that's what we're working on currently.
Did you have more to present?
If there's no other questions, we have nothing else to present.
We have further testimony and hoping that you may stay in the room throughout the presentation to see if we might have some follow-up questions that would be appreciated, if that's okay.
Yes, no problem.
Okay.
I would also like to tell the committee that if you're ever curious about how we apply the weight law, what does a vehicle get per axle? What does it get under bridge formula? We would be more than happy to bring back our training staff and give you a modified version of that just so you have a better understanding of the weights and measures in this state. So if that's something you're ever interested in, please let us know.
Well, I do have one question. about like the locals and how you interact. And we have village police, and I see them pulling over trucks all the time and citing tickets, and seems like we're duplicitous. And maybe you can shine some light on that too.
Well, when it pertains to Michigan weight law, obviously a lot of local municipalities adopt Act 300. So they're able to enforce, any certified officer or weighmaster can enforce parts of the motor vehicle code, specifically size and weight. I will tell you that the majority of the weightmasters or local officers performing this have been trained by MSP. We put on a local weighmaster seminar once per year at Saginaw Valley. We have 2 of our members that spearhead that. We do that for 2 reasons. A, we want to make sure there's consistency across the state because locals can enforce it. And if they're going to, we want to ensure they're enforcing it correctly. Now, there are some local ordinances that they will enforce that obviously state police, we do not enforce local ordinance. So there are certain things they may do that may be slightly different than what we would do. So there are several local officers, to include weighmasters, which are not certified officers, out there performing size and weight functions.
And do they, if they do submit a fine, does it go to the state police fund or does it go to the local funds?
Well, when it comes to fines, for the state police, our weight funds, our size and weight in general, they're going to go to the court and library system of the state of Michigan. So the court does get a portion of it. For the locals, it really is going to the court and back to the local PDs.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you for your testimony. I appreciate you guys being here today. And so with that, I'm going to have our next guest come. And today we have individual from that drives, let me see, Mr. Glenn Merkel, and with Davis Cartage. And they're the individuals in the industry that drives on the Michigan roads. And I appreciate you being here today. And whenever you're ready, please just introduce yourself and start.
Hello, thank you for having us here today. My name is Jill Sokaz, and I serve as the president of the Michigan Trucking Association, a 90-year-old organization serving the interests of transportation in Michigan. We're made up of for-hire carriers, private carriers, and some associate members, those that would provide products and services to the organizations or to the trucking organizations. Glenn is really one of our gurus on size and weight. It's been around for quite a while, so I'm going to defer to him.
And then you can tell me, like, explain where you're from and who you represent, and that as well too, because I'm just looking at my notes and I don't have all that
I'm sorry.
detail here.
I'm with the Michigan Trucking Association. I serve as the president and CEO for the organization, which is a not-for-profit trade organization. We represent the interests of trucking companies and trucking vendors that would supply a product and service.
Hello, I'm Glenn Merkel, chairman of the Michigan Trucking Association. I'm also here today representing my company, Davis Cartage Company. We're headquartered in Corona, Michigan, with offices in Owasso. We've got locations in Mason, Niles, and Owasso, as well as Corona. I'm the president of Davis Cartage and a major shareholder, president and chairman. We have about 120 full-time employees. We have 120 full-time employees through our trucking and warehousing and logistics operations. We operate 50 trucks, both from anywhere from straight trucks to semi-trailers to heavy haul. We've got about 16 heavy haul units. We operate in Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana. We try to keep our trucks within about 250 miles of home, so our drivers, most of, any given night, 85% of my drivers are home sleeping in their own bed. our 8-axle units that we have, 8-axle trailers. They're plated at up to 160,000 pounds, can transport 100,000 pounds of payload. And we operate about 500,000 square feet of commercial food-grade warehouse space. The history of Michigan truck weight laws, initially, Michigan did not limit the number of axles on trucks, allowing for a maximum of 13 axles and a gross weight of 169,000 pounds. This was followed by limits on overall length and per axle loadings, which limited vehicles to a maximum of 13 axles, a gross vehicle weight of 169,000 pounds. Since 1967, the maximum number of axles have been limited to 11 axles and have resulted in maximum vehicle weights of 164,000 pounds. These laws are allowed under the grandfather clause in the federal law. If these laws are repealed, they may not be reenacted. Michigan truck weight law is designed to control the axle loads instead of the gross vehicle weight, which researchers have showed that pavement damage is directly related to heavy axle loadings, not gross vehicle weight. Michigan is a peninsular state, and we rely heavily on our industries on these multi-axle rigs, from three-axle trailers to 8-axle trailers. Automotive assembly, it's parts and assembly, it's very critical to. Most all that's done on multi-axle equipment. Agricultural, from the farm to the food process is almost all done on multi-axle equipment. Food processing, a lot of the food processors in Michigan use them also. Forestry products are all done on multi-axle equipment. The lumber industry, finished lumber is transported intrastate on multi-axle equipment, and also our petroleum industry is all done on multi-axle equipment. For the industries that have heavy enough products that they can fully utilize 8-axle rig, they can typically haul 2.5 times the product with just one driver and one tractor, saving fuel, wear and tear on the roads, and time. The surrounding states of Indiana, Ohio, Wisconsin, and Ontario all have different degrees that allow multi-axle configurations. This isn't just a Michigan thing. As well as several states have agricultural exemptions, and like Maine has the same laws that we have for the forestry products. So we're not unique in that aspect. I don't know if anybody has any questions or anything else to add.
Could you, I don't know if you might be able to answer, but the different weight limits during the seasons?
Yeah, the frost laws are called Class A routes, which are year-round routes, mainly interstates and highways, and have a good enough base. And then there's Class B routes, which during the frost season in the spring, they're restricted to about, is it 65%? 35%, reduction.
The weight has to be 35% less than,
Correct?
yeah.
Correct,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. And then, and is there different roads that it's across the state that they cannot, that they have to follow that weight limit?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's designated highways or city streets that have been certified that they can go to keep the same weight all year long. All the other roads have that spring weight restriction.
Okay. And then is there a study on the different weights of what one state allows and what our state allows, and how that affects or doesn't affect the integrity of the road? Is there a study? Maybe, I don't know if Michigan State Police has it, or MDOT, or...
I'm not aware of one.
Okay. And do you know the dates of when the seasons are, of when the weight restrictions come into play and when they don't?
It's controlled by MDOT, and it's based on the frost, it goes on,
Usually it starts in
March.
based on the depth of the frost.
Frost, yeah.
Okay,
and it goes by regions then. Where the southern Michigan, the frost will go off, quicker. UP takes the longest. It kind of goes gradually, steps up the state.
and then how, it's one of those questions, but how is, like, the weighing stations? I mean, you only deal in the state of Michigan, so you don't really have a guide of how it is in Indiana with all the different weight, where you have to drive, all the different weight spots where you have to get weighed. Does that, like, infringe upon what you're trying to do as a trucking company? Is it normal across the country? How often that you have to be weighed?
We may get weighed, our trucks may get weighed if they're traveling interstate several times a day. Because they'll get, we operate both. We've got a fleet of trucks that pretty much stay in Michigan. We have a fleet of trucks then that we do interstate work with. And so they could get weighed in Michigan, then again in Ohio, twice,
Is it more so in Michigan versus Ohio, or is it,
I think it's pretty universal,
okay? Does it make it difficult to move goods around? Is it being weighed? Are you being weighed too much? I know every morning I weigh myself too much, so, and I don't really like what I see all the time, and I should probably give some fines,
No,
but just wondering about how it is with your business.
Yeah, we operate a legal business, so we don't get in much trouble. It's very rare. It's usually because someone's made an error. If we get an overweight ticket or get pulled in, which probably happens once or twice a year, and a lot of times it's not on our heavy haul rigs. It'll be on one of our tandem rigs where we'll have a customer that, we had one come up this spring where they said they loaded 40,000 pounds on our trailer and they actually loaded 50,000 pounds. Mm-hmm. Because the product was wet, they were estimating the weight instead of giving the actual weight. We got a ticket for that, and went to court, and paid the fine.
Yeah, I'm just, and the other one is, I know that I thought we passed some laws that propane can be on the roads off-season, because you have to get propane up to certain areas. That's the only way to heat their houses. Are you familiar with that at all?
I heat my house on propane, and I know I cannot get, they have to do reduced loads during frost season, in Owasso. I think that you're talking about like when there's an emergency, like when they had that big ice storm up at, northern lower peninsula this year. That's when they can waive, the state can actually waive the laws.
Okay. And then I guess I just want to go back, and I know it's not necessarily the trucking industry, and it might not be MSP, but just that the integrity of the road and the weight limits on the road, and are we hurting in that regard of deteriorating our roads faster because of our weights? And I don't know. I just need that information. I'm not sure who might be able to share it with me.
The multi-axle rigs, because they have less, they're like limited to 13,000 pounds per axle versus a tandem axle unit can have 17,000 pounds an axle. They do, our 8-axle rigs or our multi-axle rigs cause less road damage than a standard interstate configuration semi-tractor trailer.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Yes? Rep. Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Merkel. I'm not sure if this is for you, Glenn, or maybe Inspector Morris, but how often, and by how much, are some of these how often is it a truck just way overweight? Like, how often does that happen, and to what extent? What is the most egregious weight that you've seen a truck carry through? But again, how often are you citing these trucks? How many trucks are overweight? Like, is it a big percentage? Is it a small percentage? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir. That's a good question. So, we talked about it a little earlier. MSP, I can't account for all size and weight from locals, but for MSP, CVED, we weigh approximately 10,000 vehicles a year. Of that, about 60% of those that are weighed are cited for being overweight. That being said, we screen over 5 million vehicles. So as they come through our weigh station or over our wireless weigh-in motions that we view web-based from our patrol car, whether we're stationary or mobile, we screen over 5 million vehicles per year for overweight that we physically know have come across one of those devices. We weigh, though, either by platform deck at the scale, which is a large platform deck they drive upon, or by our portable scales in our patrol unit. We weigh about 10,000 vehicles. Of those, on average, about 6,000 roughly are cited per year. And that is an average that we've held for well over a decade. So the percentage is smaller than you would think it would be. However, those are usually very egregious overweights. So in other words, they are surpassing the threshold set within the Michigan weight law. So again, we're screening for the ones that are potentially causing the most damage. Now, there is a debate about vehicle damage, longer combinations versus shorter combinations. I can't really answer to that. I think that MDOT may have some specialists that can talk about pavement and what type of pavement, what is the base, all that. But we've had this discussion internally, the longer combinations, it is true that they, in fact, the weight is spread over more axles. And if those axles are within tolerance, in theory, it should be distributed much better across that pavement. In other words, versus your shorter combinations that are packed and a little heavier in a shorter combination and more downward pressure on those axles. So there's been debate about that for years, and there's multiple weight studies out there. There's not one I'm aware that is comprehensive that compares state to state. Each state has something similar that may be of use, but there is some debate on what vehicles cause the most damage. We have our opinions, but again, we're not experts as to the road itself, the base, concrete versus pavement. So, but it is something to think about because our roads, in fact, do take, obviously, some wear and tear from our commercial vehicles.
Rep. Slaw.
So don't walk away. So, Mr. Morris, I heard you use the term screen several times, so we're screening vehicles. And I definitely don't want to take a class on how to become a weight judge or whatever else it might be that your compatriot is helping to teach. But what is screen? How do you screen a vehicle that's traveling down a truck that's traveling that kind of thing? How does that work? How do you get to 5 million vehicles in a year? Looking at 5 million vehicles in a year and only come up with 11,000 stops.
Well, that's a great question. For our weigh station specifically, as vehicles enter our weigh station, they go over what's called a WIM, a wireless weigh-in motion scale. It is screened, and we receive, through our monitors, a diagram basically of that vehicle, the axle configuration, the spacing between the axles, and if any of those axles exceed Michigan base law. So we know very quickly as we're screening those vehicles which ones are going to be stopped. Some of our more advanced weigh stations screen the vehicle and stop it for us. In other words, those weigh stations have what we call sorter lanes. Not all of them have this because it's a very expensive endeavor. But with those, not only does the system sort, but we can manually sort them. We also, through Mobile Patrol, visually look at vehicles. There are a lot of visual indications we look for. Take technology out of the equation. Before we had all this, we look for bulging tires. We look for the type of commodity. the strain on the engine as it's pulling. These can all be indications of potential overweights. And then we move to our mobile patrol technology, which is our wireless weigh-in motions. Same concept. If we are sitting within a reasonable distance of those, and we can be anywhere now because they're web-based, we're going to see a similar diagram on our laptop that we would see from our weigh station. It'll show us the configuration, the spacing between the axles, and if that vehicle is overweight, whether it be axle or gross or a combination of both. So what it allows us to do is really kind of narrow down and look for the vehicles that need the most attention. Now, of those 5 million plus vehicles screened, there is one caveat to that. Not every vehicle that is overweight is going to be stopped, because there are times, obviously, manpower. We may be with another vehicle. The scales may be closed, but as somebody comes across, it's still screening. Does that make sense to everybody? So not everything, and it's a very good question. Yes, we screen over 5 million vehicles. And if we had, 3 times the amount of officers, we could probably, obviously, weigh more than 10,000 and cite more than approximately 6,000 of those vehicles screened, no question about it. But the ones we can actually stop because we have resources to do so, again, it's a little over 50% of what we weigh is cited. So we're pretty sure when we stop that vehicle that it is in fact overweight, and it's probably going to receive a citation.
So my other question for you is related to the fines for vehicles that are found to be overweight, out of compliance. How are the fines identified, and how are they applied to the organization?
Well, the fines are identified through, if you look at Michigan weight law 722, 724, 257, 722, 724, one identifies what the legal weights are, one identifies for being overweight, how many cents per pound based on the actual violation. Now, I don't recall the cents per pound off the top of my head. I'm sure Lieutenant Haynes can look it up for us real quick. Apparently, Lieutenant Haynes has memorized the weight schedule. It goes up with the violation. So the heavier the weight, either by gross or per axle, or per axle configuration, meaning group of axles, the higher the weight fine. Now, there are other fees on top of those weight fines that are imposed by the courts. That has nothing to do with the weight fine itself. Those are administrative fees. I will tell you that while Michigan allows the most weight, some of the most highest weights in the country, from my understanding, based on my conversation with other states, we also have a very progressive weight schedule. In other words, if you're significantly overweight, it can be a very, very significant fine here in Michigan for the damage in which you probably caused for being that severe overweight. And we'll be happy to share that fine schedule with you.
It's on page 6.
Yes, there you
So
have it.
thank you. Good, okay. Any nefarious activity out there when you wait? Do you find any of that?
For the most part, the majority of the industry tries to operate within the tolerances. They understand that overloading your truck causes stress on the suspension, the brakes, all those things that they have to keep up on with maintenance. Plus, if you are stopped and if you're given a significant weight citation, most companies, that's usually about it for them. They don't want to repeat that. However, that being said, of course, there are those out there that no matter what want to avoid the weigh stations, want to run side roads, trunk lines, places where there's no fixed site, and mobile patrols, the only thing they have to circumvent. And in those situations, we have found, not always, but often, when we stop vehicles that are trying to go out of their way to avoid us, we find some very significant overweights. Now, are they as plentiful as the ones we find on the main trunk lines day in and day out? No. But they do, in fact, exist. And in Michigan, it also exists seasonally, dependent on the type of commodity. So keep in mind, you have harvest season with farmers. They load directly out of the field. They may not have any idea how much is on that vehicle. Now, farmers are given a 10% grace, but still, they may exceed that significantly. Timber, they load directly out of the field. If that timber's wet versus dry, if it's muddy in the area where they're picking it up, the vehicle suspension, the wheels are packed. There's a lot of factors that can cause a vehicle to be significantly over.
Rep. Edwards.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a follow-up question. Rep. Slaw stole my question and my thunder. But I just wanted clarification on the fee schedule, not really the fee schedule, but the process. So you said 60% are overweight, but then only 50% receive a citation. So all of those, do they go to court? Is there a court fee that's added to the overweight fee? And just wondering that part.
If we issue a weight citation, so again, we weigh about 10,000 vehicles physically a year. About 6,000 are roughly issued a citation, so a little over, obviously, over 50%. If we issue a citation for overweight, we don't determine the fee schedule. The fee schedule is determined by the court based upon the size of the overweight, whether it be by individual axle or total over gross. They'll apply the X amount of cents per pound and determine what the overweight violation is. Second, there are other administrative fees that are added, and that is dependent upon each individual court jurisdiction. We have no say, we have no knowledge of that. We're aware that there are court fees that are tacked on. Our only purpose is to determine overweight, issue the citation. The court will then determine what's applicable as far as the violation, following the weight schedule, which is defined in law.
Rep. Morgan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think sort of in line with that same, do we know when the last time the fee schedule was updated?
It would be, I'd have to look at the actual section of law and see the last update. Do we have it? Be at the bottom. We'll look it up right now. I can tell you, I don't believe it's been updated. It's been quite some time. I'll be curious to see what the actual date is on it right now.
I'm going to go to Rep. Borton while you guys look that up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is for Inspector Morris. I do a lot of traveling, both within Michigan and out of state. So obviously, I go past a lot of weigh stations. And of course, I'll see the signs, weigh station open, weigh station closed. It seems like, to me anyways, it seems like more times than not, they're closed. Is that for a lack of manpower?
Well, it's two reasons. If it's been over the last 24 to 36 months, you've seen more closures. Yeah. That's true. For example, our busiest weigh station in the state, they screen more than 500 vehicles per hour both sides, is Monroe on I-75. The I-75 project for repaving took 2 years. We had to close those scales for 2 years because there was no way traffic could be funneled in safely. Subsequently, we just closed our Ionia scales because of the I-96 project. Now, we all know that roads have to get fixed. So in addition to our renovations to our scales, which have closed them over the last 36 to 48 months to renovate them, you couple that with major road projects that also close them, we have seen, yes, a significant amount of closure time. However, now that a lot of that's been updated and a lot of the roads have been done, you will start to see those scales open. Then there's the second challenge, and you're correct, sir. At times, there is a manpower issue. We have to balance the weigh stations with mobile patrol, but also calls for general service. Because while size and weight is a large portion of our job, we are still first responders and get called away for multiple things. So we have 97 officers statewide currently to man 15 weigh stations, do all the mobile patrols, and answer calls for service. That relatively is a small number. We have 25 sergeants, which do patrol, and we have 10 investigators, which patrol about a third of their time because they're actually doing investigations on trucking companies and audits. So the culmination of road projects, us renovating the weigh stations significantly, which caused them to be closed, and of course manpower, it's made for a perfect storm over time. But I can tell you we're starting to come out of it because of the road projects being completed, updates to the scales, and now our 97 officers, hopefully after January, school starts and they graduate in June, that 97 will be closer to maybe 108 to 110. It doesn't seem like a lot of an increase. However, I can tell you 10 to 12 officers spread around to the right locations is a significant impact. Significant. Average officer is going to do between 700 and 1,000 traffic stops a year. That's a lot of contacts with trucks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir.
Do you guys have the answer to
When? But was there an increase in the fees? Probably not. It was an adjustment. Amended in '24, but no increase. So that means we'd have to go back probably more than a decade or two to find out when the last increase was, because there hasn't been one to my knowledge in at least the last decade.
Okay, yeah, the reason for that question was just trying to understand if it seems like we don't have the staffing or the enforcement capability on a more regular basis, that the alternative to being able to more thoroughly enforce would be setting the fines to a point where they are more, I guess, direct and encouraging folks to be more careful about the roadway. It seems like if we still have 6,000 a year that are overweight, that still seems like quite a few, given that we have the highest weights in the country. It just feels like we should have very few at that point. Because you're putting a wild amount of weight on our roads. If we have the highest weights in the country and you're still overloading it, I understand mistakes or issues happen, but it still feels that 6,000 that we catch is far more than I would be comfortable with.
Good point. Yes. Keep in mind with that 6,000, that includes yearly activity, but also includes frost law restrictions in the spring. And frost law restrictions, even though the industry knows it's coming, a lot of our interstate drivers should be aware but may not be aware, so there are a lot of significant citations issued during that time frame as well. Not just by MSP, but also by our local municipalities.
Great presentation. I really appreciate everybody being here today. And with no further business or further question, wait. We already approved the minutes. So with no further business, we are adjourned.